tutti e tutte, benvenuti e benvenute. Sono Marianna Vecellio, curatore presso il Castello di Rivoli, Museo d'Arte Contemporanea, e sono felice, molto felice, di presentare Timothy Morton, filosofo tra i più intriganti, provocatori, autore del libro Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology, che sarà oggi in conversazione con Gianluca Didino, scrittore e giornalista culturale. L'appuntamento di quest'oggi si inserisce nell'ambito del progetto di Public Program Vibrant Natures on Telluric Cosmologies, nature vibranti sulle cosmologie telluriche, un progetto sviluppato da Almanac, Castello di Rivoli, Museo d'Arte Contemporanea e Orti Generali, che ho il piacere di curare con Guido Sant'Andrea. Un progetto che continua la riflessione iniziata nel primo capitolo, realizzato tra febbraio e marzo del 2024, intitolato Vibrant Natures on Decay and Rebirth, nature vibranti sul decadimento e la rinascita. Sostenuto da Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo, Vibrant Natures on Telluric Cosmologies prosegue la ricerca proprio condotta dal primo capitolo, fondandosi su quelli che sono i caratteri di complessità, pluralità, coesistenza e reciprocità propri della natura. Ringrazio moltissimo Timothy Morton, a cui do il benvenuto per questa occasione di approfondimento in occasione della pubblicazione di Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology, che uscirà in italiano a brevissimo, si parla di poche settimane se non giorni, edito da Timeo, con il titolo Inferno, William Blake e la ricerca di un'ecologia cristiana. Saluto e ringrazio anche per la sua partecipazione Gianluca Didino, scrittore e giornalista culturale, che è qui oggi con noi. Timothy Morton sostiene che esiste una relazione inaspettata ma anche profonda tra religione ed ecologia e che questa relazione può guidare una risposta su scala planetaria alla crisi climatica. I sentimenti spirituali e mistici hanno, secondo la visione del filosofo, una profonda risonanza con il pensiero ecologico e insieme forniscono le risorse di bisogno, fondandosi sulla compenetrazione tra ecologia e misticismo e invocando un movimento ambientalista globale. Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology è un viaggio nel mondo sotterraneo contemporaneo che offre una sorprendente visione di salvezza. Ecco, condivido con voi una frase tratta dal libro in cui Morton dice: per sfuggire dall'inferno del riscaldamento globale è necessario un radicale e mistico matrimonio tra cristianesimo e biologia che risvegli un futuro oltre la selvaggia ferocia del maschio bianco. Morton è docente presso il Dipartimento di Letteratura Inglese della Rice University di Houston in Texas, è autore del blog Ecology Without Nature, ha scritto moltissimi libri, saggi di filosofia, ecologia, letteratura, musica, architettura, design. In Italia ha pubblicato moltissimo, tra i suoi libri più noti, Iperoggetti, pubblicato da Nero nel 2018, che è un caposaldo del suo pensiero filosofico, in cui proprio l'iperoggetto per eccellenza è il riscaldamento globale, la cui caratteristica è quella di esistere su dimensioni spazio-temporali così grandi per cui non è percepito in maniera diretta. Ecco, questo nuovo libro, Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology, Inferno, William Blake e la ricerca di un'ecologia cristiana, segna per cui un grande ritorno per il pubblico italiano, per cui ringraziamo particolarmente anche la casa editrice Timeo per questa preziosa occasione. Infine ci tengo anche a ricordare che questa conversazione avviene in concomitanza con la mostra Mutual Aid, Arte in collaborazione con la natura, un progetto che è in corso adesso al Castello di Rivoli, che ho curato con Francesco Manacorda, e dedicato alla visione multispecie e che proprio invita a riconsiderare la fondatezza della separazione tra natura e cultura, rileggendo proprio natura e cultura, natura e arte come elementi collaboranti chiamati proprio a supportarsi e nutrirsi a vicenda. Ma ora naturalmente lascio la parola a Gianluca Didino, che condurrà la conversazione con il nostro ospite Timothy Morton.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Marianna, for introducing us, and many thanks again to Timothy Morton for participating to this event. It's really a big pleasure and an honor as well for me. to discuss with one of my philosophical heroes, if I can say that, and to talk about this book, which I think is a very beautiful book. I read it with a lot of, I should say, with a lot of pleasure. It's also an important book, and I think we will touch on the many points that make this book really important, especially now. But I would say it's also it's a complex book, because it's a book that has so many layers to it, or maybe I should probably say it's a book that has many books within itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, for sure, as a first thing is a book about ecology, about the planet we live in and all the ways we made this planet a burning hell. Yeah. It's also a very intimate, I felt, book about a religious conversion and your conversion to Christianity. And it's therefore also a book about religion. But when I say a book about religion, I don't just mean a book about religion in general. I found it that it's a really powerful book about all the ways we need to talk about religion in new and different ways. It's a book about William Blake as well. So that's already the third book within one book. So it's in its idiosyncratic, special way. It's a book about it's a book of literary criticism, right? That's another thing that it's in there. And finally, I think this is a book that it's very kind of urgent. It's very rooted in the present. It's there were passages in the book that I read as if it were a kind of a pamphlet. Like it's a book written in present day America that talks to all of us in the westernized world, but talks a lot to present day America. So it feels very urgent as well, I think. So as you can see, and I'm talking to the public here, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot going on in this book. We'll try to do our best to do it, to talk about everything in 45 minutes. But I would like to start asking Professor Morton to introduce our public to their idea of what this hell is. Because one of the things that really struck me when I was reading the book is that this hell that we encounter in the book, it's not just the bleak, dark, scary, horrific place that we are used to, thanks to centuries of Christian theology, art, and literature, but it's also a place of strange encounters, a place of possibility, and even a place of beauty. So if you could introduce this place to our public.
Well, Gianluca, it's an honor to be working with you again, actually, after not very much time has passed. So this is a great honor and a pleasure for me to be working with you and sharing your intellect. And I wish that you had written this instead of my own preface to the book, or possibly as a sort of introduction to the introduction, because in a way, it's actually quite simple in another way. Right, because all the issues that we're talking about here, which are sort of personal issues, but they're also planetary issues, and they are social issues, they are also aesthetic, artistic, cultural, politics issues, all come down to the basic kind of interface between a life form and the environment that it's in, right? The sort of the cell wall between the realm outside the single-celled organism and the single-celled organism, right? If sentience goes all the way down to plants, and nowadays science thinks that it does, right? It definitely goes down, at least down to beetles, because they have these beautiful iridescent wing cases, which means that female beetles find those things really sexy, which means they have sentience, that they have art criticism, actually, you know. And what that means is that the sentience is actually sitting on top of a very basic layer of being that we could call the narcissistic level, the level of the sort of interface between the organism and its environment. Yeah. And I don't mean anything negative by narcissistic. When we talk about the current president of the USA, we have to talk about disordered narcissism, so-called NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. You couldn't even eat if you didn't have some kind of narcissism. And I'm a little bit here with Jacques Derrida, who's saying that there are lots of different narcissisms in the plural, which are more or less inclusive. And it's all about actually what you include and what you exclude, right? What you take in and what you leave out, what you excrete. Yeah, there's sort of, this is where religion lives, right? The thing we call religion, the thing we sometimes like to think that we have nothing to do with, but unfortunately this has to do with kind of excreting something still. So we're still in this kind of religion space, even when we're trying to reject, right? So basic acceptance, basic rejection of other beings, other life forms, right? Like imagine you're a single cell organism and you're just sort of going through the ocean like this, right? And then suddenly, you know, if you could talk at that moment, you'd be like, oh, swear word. Did I just swallow poison? Did I just poison myself? Right? That 200 million years into the future, there are some amoebae and they go, oh no, that was another life form and they're symbiotically connected to the life form. And now animals evolved from that. It's great. Or plants, right? But this random encounter with a stranger, with another life form, strange stranger, or maybe it's not even alive, right? At that moment is very uncertain. Yeah. Think also about the other evolution driver, which is sexual selection. If you're not a cloning life form, then you basically have sexual reproduction. And then if you have sentience, you have sexual selection. If sentience goes all the way down, maybe even to a single-celled organism, this is also true at that level, right? And it is absolutely unconditional, random, accidental, with no point to it, no telos, no direction. It's not about like displaying your powers. It's not about displaying how great you are at digesting poison. It's just about looking sexy, right? And, you know, this looking sexy quality is everywhere, right? Charles Darwin said, you know, when he thinks of a peacock's tail, he thinks he wants to throw up. And why? Because pleasure, and you were talking about hell as a kind of pleasure, taboo pleasure, right? Pleasure seen as sort of evil. And one of the pleasures that's seen as evil maybe is enjoying this peacock's tail, because Darwin, somewhere in the back of his head, is thinking, this is exactly what a female peacock is doing. I have the same female peacock desire in me. Male peacock also has it. Everyone has it. Like beauty is a totally transgender category. And that is an evolution driver, absolutely beyond Kantian, for no purpose at all, aesthetic delight, right? So we've got random encounters between strangers, and we've got exuberant pleasure, right? As William Blake would say, exuberance is beauty, right? Too much pleasure, the wrong kind of pleasure, the bad, you know, the wrong kind of strangers. This is what we're talking about now in politics, right? Like the whole point of fascism is policing pleasure, and it always starts with misogyny and transphobia and homophobia and attacking like poor librarians, you know, for stocking certain books, right? So this is kind of the point, right? And the war on so-called the woke, right, of actually being more just loving and accepting of other people and oneself, you know. The other thing, of course, the other evolution driver is the thing called natural selection. We've got symbiosis, which is random encounters. We've got sexual selection, which is trans beauty. Then we have natural selection, which is also totally random. Yeah, there is no Ford's gear in evolution. There's nothing about this that has any. If Steve Jobs had designed this, this would be a little dot, because this ear is very inefficient, right? All this stuff has no meaning to it. It's just that whoever had these ears was able to have kids, so they passed on these ears to others, right? That this little bit of the ear is from when there was like a lemur that had the sort of pointy ears, right? And they're pointing, and then they sort of folded in. There was no point to this. This is a monstrosity, right? When at that moment, like as the same with a random encounter or the peacock's tail that makes you want to throw up. The mutation is a monstrosity until it gets repeated, and then it's called a variation. But actually, at that moment, what we're dealing with when we look at the world is a world of beautiful monsters.
Yeah, the way you're describing this place is not, I mean, I don't feel it hellish at all. So what is making hell hellish?
Right.
Yeah.
This search for the desire to, the search for, the definition of evil as someone, whether it be a person like the devil, you know, or whether it be another life form, whether it be another human being, right? The Greek for this other evil being is a masculine noun, is hoponeros, right? Poneo is to toil in slavery, actually. The slave master, for technically, is the evil, right? Or evil is a kind of substance, right? This is a feminine noun in Greek. It's the heponeria. It's a stigma. It's something that I can remove from myself. I can remove it from someone else. I can cut it out of the world, right? Both these ideas of evil are in themselves evil, right? The attempt to eliminate evil in the form of some kind of demonized other who is named as inhuman or unhuman, the title of a book that J.D. Vance was working with, is some people are unhuman because of their ideas. They should be executed, right? Because of the ideas in their head, right? This search for evil in the other is exactly evil, right? But you see, in the Lord's Prayer, when Jesus is saying, deliver us from evil, we all say this, you know, we all say that. We hear it in our head, even if we don't say it. And we think it's this transactional, like, yada, 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 as they would say over here, you know, I'll do this and you do that, and deliver us from evil. I'll be nice to people and you get rid of the evil, right? And we think that means get rid of the evil guy or get rid of the evil thing. But actually, evil in this prayer is neuter. It's toponeron. This means phenomenological evil. This is evil. You cannot escape from this evil. It's like an adjective. It's like using a noun as an adjective. It's like deliver us from red, deliver us from up, right? It's an adverb, it's an adjective. And it is what is really called, what is being named in the word original sin, is actually, in a way, it's inevitable to being a life form, a sentient being, that you have this kind of, Heidegger calls it conscience, right? But it is basically just time-delayed awareness. Like, did I switch the lights off in the other room before I did this? You know, did I leave the gas on? You know, that sort of déjà vu. You know, did we have this conversation before? Like, that's the default awareness. We think it's the exception, but it's actually the default, because of the fact that we are experiencing this thing here, which is the body and the biosphere that it grew out of, about 300 milliseconds in the past, right? Actual this is about 200, 300 milliseconds in the future, because of the speed of neurochemical signals. The real biosphere is in the future, right? This is in the past. So there's this kind of time-shifted quality, right? And that we feel guilty about bad things because we are the bad things, right? Like, we are the evil. This is what conscience is when you realize that trying to search for evil to get rid of it is what evil looks like. The fascist is someone who knows, they know they are the good guy, right? Like the guys who invaded the Capitol building in the USA on the 6th of January, 2021, they were certain that they were the good guys, right? This is what I call demonic angel, right? In the book, it's like, in the name of good, you are creating the bad hell, right? In the name of getting rid of hell or punishing people, sending them to hell, you are creating hell. You are hell, yeah. Right? As opposed to this funny feeling that actually I am I'm a mistake. I'm an error. I'm out of joint. I have this conscience, right? This is what I'm calling angelic demon, right?
Yeah, there is this beautiful. Oh, sorry.
No, please. It was just
I
to finish that one sentence. There's a sort of no. I think I might be the bad guy. Is how being the good guy feels, right? Like truly great America would be America realizing that the legacy of slavery continues all the way to the fact that my son was put in detention for being 5 seconds late to class by hall monitors who were smiling, smirking with glee yesterday as they put him in this detention. And in this detention on Saturday morning, he has to sit still for 3 hours without reading, without a cell phone. This is punishment. This is torture level of punishment, right? In a meditation retreat, you don't sit for 3 hours. You do maybe 45 minutes, and then you get up and you walk, right? This is something else, you know. And this is the way in which it's the legacy of slavery. And to go back to this word evil that Jesus is using, porneron means slavery. Is what it really means. It means the toil, the burden, the legacy of slavery. Like a very accurate literal translation would be liberate us, because deliver us actually means liberate, like pull us out of the legacy of slavery. That's literally what Jesus is saying.
You actually kind of answered the question I was about to ask, but I think there is this one of the best images in the whole book is this idea that something started going very wrong with Christianity, but also with the West, when we started thinking about humans as spiritual being trapped in this kind of evil matter, when the reality, that's what you argue, but I think it's very powerful. It's a very powerful idea, is actually the opposite. So you talk about flip Gnosticism. So the matter, the stuff that makes reality is not the problem at all. The problem is exactly what you just said. So the idea, the fact that we started thinking we are the good guys, we are in control, we can if I'm in control, I can exert this control, I can dominate, right? Is that correct? Yeah.
There's something terrible about ideas. All ideas are terrible in both senses of the word, like in the Brian Eno lyrics of the song The Overload, Talking Heads, a terrible signal. It's really malfunctioning at some level. All ideas are crap, right? Also, they are demonic because you can't kill them. They're like cartoon characters. You try to get rid of them, they pop up somewhere else. Ideas are like memes and tweets. They just kind of lie around like viruses, waiting for someone to just come along and retweet. And really, evil is exactly Hannah Arendt, right? The evil is the banality, right? Where I am just following orders. I am just hitting retweet. And in a world that is still controlled by the enslavement, this is always done a default to misogynistic, transphobic, racist, etc. violence. Yeah. This idea that, you know, really this thing here is like, there's a kind of silence to it, right? There is a kind of beautiful, opaque quality to the universe, right? This opacity is everywhere. It's even within the structure of truth, like the microwave background radiation. You can see this microwave background radiation when you turn on an old TV set and you see the snow. It's from the first moments of the universe, right? In the same way, within truth itself, there is this opacity, right? You can say things that are true, but you can't prove them, prove that they're true. Any logical system must be able to say that, right? This isn't just saying that ideas are made out of squiggles and that you know means that they were always contaminated. That's a really low level way of thinking about it. Within truth itself, there is this kind of opaque kind of physicality to it. If the physical universe is anything from a religion, I'm not using that word very specifically. You could say spirituality, you could say anything you want, right? From that point of view, the universe is like God going shh, right? So the quiet, like meditate, like that. the ideas are like the angels and the devils. They just kind of haunt you all the time. But we live in this world where there is a possibility of the quietness. You know, once you realize you live in hell, you are obliged to create paradise at whatever scale. I mean, this could be a nice meal for your friend. It could be a nice interview that you're doing with Gianluca. It could be a whole new way of doing social justice. It could be on any scale you want, right? But the point is to create a refuge from hell. What is the hell? It's meaning, right? Hell is a place where everything is saturated with meaning, right? This is a bad person, cup of coffee. This is a bad person, pair of glasses. I'm a bad, evil person in hell. This is a bad person, room, right? In this way, heaven is also hell, but it's just hell for good people, right? Everything has a meaning to it, right? And the releasement, again, deliverance from the hell of too much meaning. You know, this is what I'm calling flipped Gnosticism. Yeah, that we are not spiritual beings trapped in a universe created by an idiot. We are actually lovely, flawed, physical beings trapped in a universe of terrible, terrible ideas about itself.
Yeah, I think these are really, really fantastic and powerful ideas. So we've been talking about angels, demons, hell, heaven. These are all very religious concepts. They're not specifically Christian, maybe because many religions have hells and paradises and angels and demons, but we can't escape the fact that they are religious. So there is a friend of mine, a Buddhist, who keeps saying that the best philosophy in the last 10 years has been written by theologians. I'm not sure if he's right, but for sure, I think religion is coming back. And I think it's very important that religion is coming back. But I also think it's really important that we find new ways of talking about religion. Yeah. And I think that your book is an excellent example of this, because your idea of Christianity is radically ecological, radically anti-racist, and all these aspects are kind of intertwined together. So I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit of what religion and Christianity means to you in this very radically new, non-oppressive way, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. I really do. What if, this is going to sound so stupid, but maybe the fact that it sounds stupid is because of ideology, right? What if love could save the world, right? What if the things that are preserved and sheltered and hidden within and talked about in bad ways and good ways and whatever ways, in the thing called religion, yeah, love, mercy, pity, peace, right? What if those things were actually exactly the right affect, feel, motivation, practice at a planet scale, right? The bigger the event, it seems to me, intuitively, the smaller I feel. Not just it's physically big, but it is also psychologically big, right? We're watching right now, like tiny little children, adults committing crimes on our bodies. And the reason why it's so hard to act at planet scale is because it's so regressing. You feel like you're 2 years old, 3 years old, confronting this hell of being in a family. There's no escape. You can't escape from the biosphere. You're feeling so tiny, and at the same time, you have to act, right? I am a survivor of a very bad abuse connected to a crime syndicate family in London. And so all these things that are happening in the world right now are really evocative of my childhood, right? And how did I survive my childhood? Yeah. Rule number one of being in a horror movie and surviving is that you are in a horror movie. You have to know that it's horror movie, right? Step one of liberation, right? You realize you're in prison. Yeah. Ripley in Alien knows something that the other people don't know in that movie, right? You very quickly, she knows it, right? You can't negotiate with Alien. You can't fight Alien. You can't escape from Alien. There's only one thing you can do. You have to blow Alien out of the airlock, right? And she knows it. And this is how she survives it, right? So all my work has really been sitting on top of this stuff, right? My own encounter with religion was decades of trying to escape from this demonic family dynamic, you know, and so my initial encounters with the thing called Christianity were very, very, very negative, because I couldn't imagine being loved by anybody, you know, whether it would be another human being or a cat or the thing called God or whatever. I couldn't really imagine it. Like I could say that I knew, right? But I didn't know. I actually didn't know, you know, but I knew there was something very, very wrong with me, you know, something's wrong. So I kind of fled into, first of all, getting every single A grade known to humanity, right? And getting every single university degree you could possibly get to become successful, you know, and also into Buddhism. I've been studying Buddhism very seriously since about the age of 17. And in the end, you know, for the last 20 years or so, in the lineage of Dzogchen, Tibetan Buddhism, going on meditation retreats, going to Mount Kailash, you know, circumambulating Mount Kailash is 23,000 feet. I did it, right? It's not Buddhism's fault that this thing happened to me, right? Which was you calling conversion, and in a way, what I was calling Buddhism wasn't actually Buddhism. What it was me working for the man. You know, in Tibetan Buddhism, you have to do like 100,000 mantra of Vajrasattva. This is a 100-syllable mantra. So you're doing 100,000 times 100 of this. And you're visualizing as you're doing it, you're doing the mala, right? And it could take years if you're lazy like me. And you think, you know, if I just do enough of these things, if I just do enough of this video game grind, I can level up into a thing called enlightenment, or I can have the weekend off and it's called being enlightened. And unfortunately, that's not Buddhism's fault that I was seeing it through this enslavement, labor for a boss kind of a way, right? Something happened to me while I was writing this book. I had this huge surgery and my stomach was cut open all these different ways. And it just kind of reset whatever that is, you know, my being, my soul, I like to say soul now instead of self or subjectivity or whatever. It's actually better. And then somehow that resulted in noticing that someone was in there already, you know, messing with the controls, kind of remixing me into like a more vibrant 12-inch version of who I am, you know. This is what Jesus says he's up to, you know, and he says he's up to, like, he wants you to have more life, you know. He's having this leavening effect on you. And I can't explain it, right? I cannot explain it. It's embarrassing in a certain way. It takes the form of, if you were going to point to any kind of sect, it's like Pentecostalism, right? White Pentecostals are destroying Earth right now. And I just got stuck in their, you know, in the thing that they say that they're doing, you know. So the whole thing makes very little sense to me, which in a way, that's sort of why I trust it, actually, Gianluca. That's a very long and a little bit malfunctioning answer to your question.
I think it did answer. I also think that you wrote very beautiful things about Buddhism. So I think you actually got it right. But anyway, so you say that you kind of woke up at some point being a Christian, and I was wondering when I was reading the book, how did that feel? Because you woke up Christian in a country in the States that are using Christianity as a weapon, literally,
Right.
weaponizing Christianity.
Right. Well, just from the point of view of the lineage of deconstruction that I found myself in, after some of the gaslighting from a certain kind of Hegelian Marxism had worn off, I am a communist, incidentally, but I'm not your granddaddy's communist. There are a lot of Hegelian Marxists, including Slavoj Žižek, very cross with my way of thinking about things. But the idea is deconstruction. What is it? You're not really destroying anything. It's more like bomb disposal, right? You're inside the bomb, you're cutting the wire so that it can't hurt people, right? The white supremacy wire, patriarchy wire, inside the white philosophy, right? So already it's like you're using the stuff, in a kind of Aikido. And already I've been using things like Darwin, who was weaponized, and neo-Darwinism, this is really weaponized, and kind of disarming it from the inside to use it in a different way, right? Rather than try to say something opposite or escape from it. I think it's better to go inside it and like disarm it from the inside, right? So from that point of view, I was determined to go inside of Christianity, at least, and be able to talk from inside of it, because like people like me, the academics, if I was an academic, if I was a white guy in the 60s and I was teaching in a university, I'd say things like Jesus didn't mean blah, 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 blah. Jesus meant blah, 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 blah. And I think that was part of my job. And somehow people like me who studied New Left theory, right? And I love it. I'm part of it. I am it. I'm in it. I grew out of it, right? We all got this, forgive me, I say things that other people don't want to say. And I say unconscious things that get me in trouble because I love to be the scapegoat. I say I hate to be the scapegoat at the same time, by the way. Could I please not be the scapegoat all my life, but somehow we got this unconscious memo: never talk about God, don't talk religion, don't talk spirituality, even don't say Jesus, don't say Buddha, and when Irigaray, feminist philosopher, started to say prana, this is another aspect of the how does it feel, right? When she talks about prana, subtle body, when she talks about that, nadi, bindu, that's when people are like, oh, she's gone crazy. We don't have to read her anymore. She's just an idiot. She's just a lunatic, right? But that's the interesting bit, right? Transpersonal, physical, quasi-psychic, quasi-physical experiences that are called in Indian and Chinese and so on medicine, subtle body, right? What it feels like, in answer to that question, pardon me, having bad asthma from this pollen that's in the air because of global warming. There's so much more pollen and it's making me choke. But it is a physical sensation, actually. It's not an idea. I'm having a lot of thoughts about Jesus, about the Holy Spirit, right? But it's not it, he, she, them is not a concept. It's actually embodied, it's embodied in the way that Zizek loves how C.S. Lewis immediately hates on that aspect of his conversion experience. He's sitting at the back of a bus and he sort of logically figures out that Christianity is the thing. And he's like, I had these sensations up and down my spine. And then that was just some kind of crap. That was just some kind of extra noise. But that's the thing. That's the good bit for me. That's the vitamins, I will hesitate here. So on the one hand, using Christianity whether I like it or not, right? That is the idea, because it's my obligation to, because the ultra-right isn't allowed to have it, right? White people who want to be fascists aren't allowed to have this thing. I've got to I want to make it safe for us to talk about it, and to talk it, and to realize that we are talking it, especially when we think we're not talking it. You know, when we're talking about the neighbor, when we're talking about mercy, when we're talking about any kind of collectivity, right? We are talking in the region of the things that religion is talking to, and we just need to get our confidence back, right? And it's not really a matter of like expounding dogma and making people believe things and making people feel bad. It's about exploring a region of life that is very primordial, right? The trouble with fascism is it's talking to this gut, sort of basic kind of vomit level of life. You can't persuade these guys because they're being paid with a salary that's much better than money. They're being paid with sadistic hits of gratification as the fascist leader hurts the other for them, right? So they don't need more money. They don't need social security. They don't need retirement. They don't need healthcare, because they're getting paid on the gut level, right? So this is a territory we need to seize on the left. We can't let fascists control our stomach and our bowels. You know, we have to find a way to live there. We have to find a way to talk from there. And incidentally, by the way, these very peculiar sensations, you know, Teresa of Avila talks about this sort of serpent-like sort of stuff. It's, yeah, right. And it's like, it's literally around my tummy that this stuff is kind of happening, right? Fascism is about like expelling the evil, you know, and maybe a lot of religion is saying, just let your body do that. Your body does that naturally. You can do something more than that, which is having mercy and compassion. You don't have to base all of your ethics and politics on expelling poison. That's what your body does anyway, right? But you can do these other things with your body.
Yeah, I want to come back to this point of feelings, but I'll do it in a moment, because there's a point I think we should really touch to, if we want to kind of try and understand your book as much as we can. One of the things that you are deconstructing a lot in this book, I think, is the dynamic between slaves and masters, slave and master dynamic, which is a very core Marxist idea. And that's I think where where your book becomes really political. You make a lot of great examples about artificial intelligence, for example, of how we are perpetuating. And I'm thinking, obviously, yeah, you're right. The United States are a country created on slavery, based on slavery, and obviously, in a way, Christianity kind of helped. No, this process, this horrible process. So it's all kind of intertwined. That's what I want to say, probably. Yeah, there's this political aspect, the religious aspect, this technological aspect,
Yes.
which makes me think about the meals Blake was talking about.
For real, what is particularly disgusting about, I'm just going to say disgusting, about white Christianity. Yeah. It's very segregated in the USA. Martin Luther King said the most segregated time in the USA is 11 a.m. on a Sunday, right? And in the name of Jesus, white people destroyed, enslaved, tortured, and killed everybody, right? Sometimes in the name of assaulting the thing called animism, which is a pejorative term for thinking that, you know, maybe ducks are people and maybe coffee's cups are alive, right? And this war is actually, in a way, an assault on the Holy Spirit from a certain point of view. In the name of Jesus, right? Assaulting the spirit of life, you know? And it is truly demonic. And there must be a reckoning with this. The trouble is, of course, that wanting to create another way of thinking, doing that isn't somehow contaminated with this, rather than looking at the contamination and addressing the contamination itself, the legacy of enslavement could redouble the problem, or just like allow the problem to perpetuate itself, right? I don't know how many years of truth and reconciliation America really needs, you know, but it probably needs about 100 years of truth and reconciliation, with like one Desmond Tutu for every few 100,000 people in the USA would begin to do it. You mentioned AI, right? There's this tendency to want evil to be diabolical. There's this tendency to want evil to be Emperor Palpatine, you know, sort of laughing to himself. Right? One thing about all those demons in the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks is they're idiots, all of them. The dwarf he's an idiot. The giant is an idiot, right? They're idiots. They're just TV characters. They just come out of the TV. They're idiotic is part of the horror. All right. And I saw a press conference with the president, whose name I don't like to say, 2 days ago. I hadn't seen him for weeks because I'm abstaining from seeing the guy. And everyone's laughing in the room. The president's laughing, and the camera person's laughing, and the interviewer's laughing, and the staff people are laughing, and they're laughing. And what are they laughing about? And why are they laughing? It's so disturbing. And it reminded me of a scene from David Lynch's Twin Peaks, which is very much about incestuous violence and the legacy of misogynistic violence against people, right? And how many survivors actually wrote to Lynch and Cheryl Lee, who plays Laura Palmer, to thank them for doing this show, because it helped them to release their feelings about it, actually. And why is this president so powerful? Because he comes out of the TV, right? There's this funny kind of link between his physical, frail, nasty body and this perfect cartoon TV image, right, which is sustaining the fascist force field. It's out of the King's Two Bodies, kind of Kantorowicz, Nazi historian kind of theory, right? You've got the earthly body and the heavenly body, yeah. They're all idiots, all of them. You can't find the diabolical one. Everyone's on this wild goose chase, like, who is the puppet master? Is Musk the puppet master? Trump the puppet master? Fox News is the puppet master. The audience, the fascist fans are the puppet master. Like, everybody's in a kind of, it's called the fasces. It means a gang or bundle or bunch, right? And of technically of sheaves of wheat, right? The wheat is very weak on its own, but in a bunch, it's very strong, right? That's the idea of the fasces, right? And it doesn't matter. They're all idiots. It's all idiocy looking like diabolical intelligence. Now, what does this remind us of? Yeah, well, we all now have access to ChatGPT and Copilot and Grok, I think is the one that Twitter calls it, right? These things that are appearing to mimic intelligence, right? There's a problem. There are two problems here. One of them is the automation aspect. It's not so much the I, it's the A that is the problem. The fact that, like, this stuff can now suck all the writing and art that was made in inevitably the past and then stir it together in a matter of seconds, right, to output something that looks like intelligence. And why does it look like intelligence? It looks like intelligence according to this idea of like command, control, mastery, right? The attempt to create, whereas what I said at the beginning was that intelligence is actually very low down. It's really low down in the cell, single cell organism in the plant life. It's very, very cheap. You know, it's all available everywhere. The attempt to create the perfect slave, right? AI, like you can get it to write your essay, click, bing, blah, 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 right? is creating the devil, right? Every story you've ever read about the devil is of the perfect servant who gives you 3 wishes or 7 wishes. They will do exactly what you tell them to do. Exactly. Just like a computer software with all the glitches, right? Because you didn't specify enough, stuff happens, right? So the attempt by Americans, because of the legacy of slavery, to create the perfect servant, it would happen in America, wouldn't it? That the silicon chip would be invented as a kind of plantation for electrons, right? That trying to get away with doing nothing, right? The 0 level of mastery is what we saw in the presidential campaign. One of those people, the woman, the black woman, was working really, really, really hard, slaving away, and the other guy wasn't even trying. That was the horror of it, was that this guy didn't even have to try. In fact, he wanted to not try, right? The ultimate performance of mastery, like the lazy, there's a chair over here called Lazy Boy, right? Where you can just sort of, right? And it's this funny duality between the perfect slave and this idea of mastery, which is sort of demonic will, demonic intention. This has nothing to do with real life forms, right? So for example, when you intend to do something, neuroscience is telling you, you already did it. You already started to do it. 300 milliseconds or whatever before you intending is an aesthetic feeling that you add to something that's already happening. This explains a lot, right? So much of our behavior is automated, and we have that legacy of that inevitably creepy legacy of the past always to deal with. Heidegger calls it the they. It's a very sinister sort of word for it, right? And in a way, you could be fully anti-racist Heidegger, because you could sort of say, always we carry around this legacy of all the nasty stuff that was done and said, right? And inevitably that stuff defaults to enslavement in our world, right? I think the fundamental problem with our world is the enslavement and the concept of mastery, the concept of slavery. If you want to kind of get rid of slavery properly, you also have to be getting rid of mastery, right? And have a totally different idea of how action works, which is much more based on kind of creativity, right? Which has to do actually with caring about things and listening to things, and sort of attending to things, right? Letting things in, you know, hesitating. Yeah, the good news is that we can hesitate. This is very good news, right? You can be in the middle of a fight with your friend and you can be like, wait a minute, why am I even doing this? What, this is stupid. This is just mechanical tit for tat revenge stuff. But mercy just means you can hesitate. How can you hesitate? It's a miracle. How can life forms hesitate, right? It's like life is a place in the universe where chemistry is having mercy on itself just for a few seconds, right? Like one chemical decides not to destroy the other one. Hesitation. Quantum theory allows for time to be jiggling like this. So actually, mercy is built into the structure of the universe. It's not a choice that we make despite the physical universe we're in. It's actually in tune with a deep aspect of the physical universe, which might only express itself in a teeny tiny sliver of that universe, but a teeny tiny sliver is all you need to know. We don't live in a machine. We are not completely slaved to the past.
Yeah. Does Blake have anything to do with that? Because obviously we've touched on many things, but we're kind of forgetting one very major part of your book, which is William Blake. What has William Blake to do with all this?
Blake is our contemporary. You know, okay, so we changed the way we don't have the same wigs anymore, right? But like if you go on Google Images and you put in Gillray, Gillray, George III, What you see, which is the king when Blake was alive, is the spitting image of the guy. He's got the same horrible embrasure. He's got the same stupid little eyes staring at things stupidly, right? He's got the same big, fat, jowly face. The wig is now a comb over, but it's the same guy. It's the same guy, right? And Blake is giving you advanced psychic combat training tools for how to survive this guy, how to understand this guy, how to resist the guy, how to not feel like you want to die every 5 minutes with the guy, because he is a working class guy who has no skin in the game. He's got no dog in the fight. He's got no reason to just love stuff for no reason, the aesthetic appreciation. He's got no cultural capital, which is why he's so good at it. And he befriended all these people. Like, he befriended feminist Mary Wollstonecraft. He befriended Thomas Taylor, who taught him Greek, right? And he was very, very good at drawing. So he makes these kind of graphic novel type memes, right? He makes these texts which are like, there's the image and there's the text, and they're kind of juxtaposed in this interesting, ironic way. And he wrote it with backwards copperplate on a tiny little piece of metal that he saved from his day job, which was printing illustrations for people. So he meant it, everything. He meant it. He wrote it backwards like this with a tiny little brush with acid, right? And the little tiny paintings. And so there's a lot of really deliberate, really subtle, really incredible, empowering stuff going on there, right? And it's like he's caught in the official Christianity of the day, but he's also full of love and joy and pleasure and hope and creativity. He's sort of like trying to find a way to make that all work, right? And you need a friend when you're walking through hell, right? Dante has Virgil, right? And I've got Blake, you know, and Blake has other guys. And when Blake's writing about hell himself, right? You need a companion to show you around, to know, to sort of check, like, this is horrible, right? This is weird. This is freaky. That the person somehow is able to hold your hand as you go through it, right? And that kind of feeling of walking with you through the nightmare is very much what I want people to feel when they read this book, right? Like, I'm also walking with myself. I'm walking with my 2-3-year-old self, holding that guy's hand, walking through, going, it's going to be okay. I'm sort of put a message in the past that it's going to be okay, you know, to this poor little guy. And but then also with your neighbor, you know, maybe we have all the teachings of Jesus, all of them. Maybe Christianity is really tiny. Maybe when he said, when 2 or 3 people are gathered together in my name, he didn't mean, and when 20 people are gathered in my name, it's 10 times more amazing. Maybe he meant not 4, because actually mathematically 4 is hyperobject, starter solution. Oddly, you know, 4 is more than a crowd. 3's company and 4's a crowd. 4 is a hyperobject. Maybe he meant it 2 or 3, not 1, but 2 or 3 people, right? Maybe we need to think about groups. Maybe groups default to narcissism, right? Like, maybe the problem is that all groups, if you don't work on them really hard, have narcissistic personality disorder. But we have the chance to create planet scale groups, right? And this guy is giving you the model for how to do it, because everything he did was about relating to groups, whether it be 2 people or 3 people or whatever, you know. And so this basic, like, let's just get companionship right, first of all. You know, this is actually a huge planet scale thing. Let's get friendship right. Let's get love right. Let's get mercy right on this very granular level. And what if actually you could scale it up so that the thing called love really is a political project axiom at a global scale?
Yeah, I think the time is up. I really hope we managed to give some sort of idea of what hell is about. Your book is about. I think we didn't touch on an important aspect, which I'm gonna touch on very quickly, just to say that I think our viewers had a feeling that this is a very warm book. It's a book full of emotion. Yeah, it's a book where there's a lot of you. The book opens with a long preface where you talk about your childhood, your upbringing, your relationship with your dad, your experiences in red culture in Britain in the 80s and 90s. So it's a book that is there's a lot of energy in the book. I think that's the right word. And reading it was a very pleasurable experience for me as well. Not just like an intellectually good experience, but also there's a lot of feeling in it. And
I'm so
yeah,
glad to hear that. If I may just add, perhaps, if you don't like mastery and slavery, then you also don't like subject and object, and you don't like idea versus feeling, right? Thought versus feeling, right? The word philosophy is two emotions, right? If you were going to choose between its emotions and its ideas, I think it's philos is a feeling, friendship, love. Wisdom, the DOM, Sophia, is the feel of wise, right? It doesn't say anything about having ideas. It says about loving wisdom. And sometimes loving wisdom is actually sort of you trying not to have ideas, because all the ideas are kind of wrong, half-baked, old, oppressive stuff, right? A feeling, what feelings in a way are ideas from the future, right? You go to therapy because you're having a feeling, you don't understand it. You need to put some words on that, right? So a feeling is actually an idea that you haven't had yet, right? So staying in your feelings is really doing philosophy, right? And so the more I can stay in my feelings and just be there in my feelings, the more I'm allowing for the future to be different than the past, right? I have a dream. Martin Luther King is already won by saying it, because the content is also this feeling of opening towards the possibility of the future. I have a dream. What's he dreaming? What's he imagining? Already millions of people are visualizing the future is different. And what's the present? We know it's the oppression. So I have a dream already. You're speaking from a place of anti-slavery, anti-racism, progressive, more just relationships between human beings and between human beings and non-human beings, right? And it's a feeling. I have a dream there's a feeling of I have a dream, right? There's a feel to it, and this feel is very much part of the explosion out of Black gay culture and also kind of punk culture of house music, rave, acid house in the mid to late 80s. And I was just very lucky to be intersect with that moment in my life, right? Maybe the last really big, really physical planet scale youth movement, right? And this quality of I have a dream. There's a lot in the book about the techno and house music, dancing, because of this, right? That, in the end, we are sort of, what's the right way to put this? Revolutionary change is always has a physical element to it, a kind of affective element to it, right? And we need to feel. We're not feeling it yet. We know what to do, right? We know to stop oil emissions. We know to stop the fascism, but why? Look, what ideas do you have that could be? But we know what to do. We know the ideas, right? Some people are like, what have you got to replace it with? Screw that. Why? Like, why? Show me why. right? Give me a really good, strong, like feeling of companionship with other life forms. Then I will know, you know, this is the sexiest, best thing ever, which is to solve the global warming planet scale emergency, which is also resulting in the global fascism right now.
I think it's a beautiful idea of philosophy, an idea that doesn't put people off reading philosophy. And it's a very good place to finish this interview, I think, as well. A very hopeful place to finish it. So I'm going to hand the conversation back to Marianne in case she has any final remarks or if she wants to add something.
Well, I'm overwhelmed by your conversation. It's been challenging to listen to you, and I want to again thank you so much for this presentation, Timothy and Gianluca, for guiding the conversation. It's been really brilliant, and Hell, it's truly an unmissable book. Thank you also for remembering the potential of hesitating. But it was so rich and dense. I allow myself to ask you one last question, which bring the attention on the relationship with art, because Hell, likewise Oggetti, for instance, are books that speaks also about art in time of global warming, and I think that art somehow is seen as one of the way, maybe, one of the main way that help us to describe or to visualize, to understand reality when we cannot speak directly about it, as we cannot perceive it empirically. And Hell, it's a book on Blake, and Blake was an artist too. And so I would like to ask you, to what extent art inspires your theoretical thinking?
Oh gosh, well, very, very deeply. Okay. So I'm now writing with Trina Balls the sequel to Hell, and it's called Paradise, right? Because the opposite of hell is not heaven, like I'm saying, it's paradise. Yeah. And the subtitle of this book is Living the Hyperobject, right? The hyperobject feeling, right? The feeling of being in a biosphere, in global warming space, is hell, right? That's the hyperobject phenomenology, to use a certain word. Once you figure out that you're in hell, you only have one choice. You have to make paradise. And what is paradise? In a way, art as such is creating paradise, right? What is this word paradise? It's from an old Iranian word, right? Pari means around, and dais, which means to shape around, like making the clay, right? This idea that the world is made out of clay is actually a very beautiful idea. And it is to do with the movement of the hands, and talking about hesitating, actually in Genesis 1:2, the Hebrew, forgive me, I forget the exact spelling, so I won't say it, but the verb means to hesitate, right? The spirit was hesitating over the waters, which is a word for this kind of it's not empty, it's void, but it is actually more like this kind of wet clay, right? The waters is precisely this wetness, right? Of this kind of silent, unspeakable quality to every work of art, is talking to silence, right? Like music in the end is talking to the silence or the quietness before and after and inside the music, right? And poetry is talking to the blank space around the poem, right? And inside the words, right? And so art is like a conversation with this quietness, and the paradise is the quiet, right? It's this creating a little refuge, hopefully for as many life forms as you can possibly have. So it's not the content. Paradise is not a certain kind of content that is in. Paradise is the wall, right? That is protecting you from the fire of hell, right? And this is literally what human beings have to end up doing. We have to create little refuge or big refuge or lots of different refuges for ourselves and other life forms inside of hell. Yeah. And then even inside of paradise itself is also a little paradise, because Adam and Eve create this little nest inside, where they can be sort of feel safe and look at paradise, right? And the universe itself is a kind of paradise. It's a kind of like a hole inside of God. It's how God gets to perceive that they are themselves, right? Proprioception, you know, like the head, shoulders, knees, and toes feeling neurologically is all the environmental awareness, right? Like imagine you're a worm and you're aware of all the earth around you, and then you flip it upside down, invert the image, and that's your feeling of your body, is your environment flipped upside down. And it's always a little tiny bit late. It's always a couple of 100 milliseconds after you felt the tunnel, which is always a couple of 100 milliseconds after the tunnel, right? So your sense of self, in a very basic way, not ego, but just this thing here, is a kind of paradise, right? It's a kind of biosphere-shaped hole in the biosphere, right? The point of this creating the paradise is like creating a jug or a vase or pot of some kind, right? That contains this void, you know, this lovely, beautiful, quiet, oh, thank God, you know, I don't have to think anymore. I can just go to sleep. You know, that's the paradise. And art is always doing that, whether it says that it's doing it or whether it thinks that it's doing it or whether it, whatever, it just is that. Yeah. And that's why it's more than special, and it's more than just pointing at utopia, and it's more than just any kind of politics. Right? Art is politics, because you're deciding to put this thing next to this thing, right? Blue and red on the canvas, put them together. But beyond and above that, it is always creating the paradise, right? This kind of quiet shelter, you know, above and beyond the rules that you have to be really quiet in a museum. There is something lovely about being quiet in a museum, you know, above and beyond the whole, you know, white cube oppression. The quietness is actually really important, and it's the feeling of the paradise.
Well, thank you. Before you mentioned that creativity is about caring, so we need care. We need the space for care. So thank you so much, Tim, for being in. Timothy Morton, and of course, thank you also to Gianluca Didino. It's a great occasion to listen to you. And Inferno, William Blake e la ricerca di un'ecologia cristiana, edizioni Timeo. L'attendiamo prestissimo. Buona giornata a tutti e a tutte.
Thank you. Grazie, Marianna. Ciao.
Thank you so much.